Hello, this is Aline White Swan. Welcome to the mysterious domain. This time I'm going to talk to you about the suit of Grails in the tuathadedanaantarot, which is the house of the Grail Keepers. Originally this deck was called the Tarot of the Holy Grail. I got talked out of it by a couple of professional marketers who for some reason didn't think that was work. So in the case of A.G. Mueller in Switzerland, they wanted to call it White Swan Tarot rather than Holy Grail Tarot. I don't know what their reason was, but they kind of had a huge change in their organization. Kind of cost me the publishing deal. Anyway, I'd been up to Roslyn Chapel and all these places before the Da Vinci Code came out, but the Da Vinci Code kind of restarted a lot of interest in the Holy Grail, and people started going to those places. And then, of course, that came and went, and my tarot decks was sitting in a box because I didn't know how to bring it out into the world. I guess I had become a bit demoralized about the whole thing, so it was in a box until 2019 or 2020, somewhere like that, when a tarot client of mine saw my artwork hanging around the house, and she commented on it, and then I told her about the tarot deck, and she was a professional marketer, and she encouraged me to do a Kickstarter, and that's a whole nother story. But anyway, the title, the Holy Grail Tarot, kind of got trashed again. So I did a poll on the Kickstarter, and people voted for tuathadedanaantarot. And I have another video where I go into more depth about that, where I do flip through the deluxe deck. You can find that, because at this point it won't be difficult. I have to learn how to put those things up there on the video. I have to learn how to do that. I haven't gotten around to that yet. So this is the suit of the Grail Keepers. This is cups in most tarot decks. And it starts with the Ace of Grails, because it sort of begins the whole story of how this tarot deck came into existence, which was I was having my dinner and I was all alone in the house, and all of a sudden it's like the table opened up, and just like in this card, I saw an underground cavern, I saw the stream, I saw this Holy Grail vessel rose up over my table, and it was beaming all kinds of three-dimensional light. And then there was smells, there was sounds, there was light coming in the door, and I turned and I saw the Maiden of Spears, of course, carrying this fiery, flaming spear. It was about 5 feet tall, came in with the spear, passed through the window. The Maiden of Swords came through, passed through the window, and they were accompanied by candle bearers and music and all kinds of stuff, and smells of roses. Roses always seem to come up in this material. Then the Maiden of Pentagrams came up, and the last one was the Maiden of Grails, and as she approached me, she held this massive vessel up to me and shone it into my face so that I could see a vortex inside of the Grail vessel, a vortex of light. And then she vanished at the windows, and I got the instruction to start drawing. So that first ace is the Grail vessel, and we have the Holy Spirit. It combines the Holy Spirit with the head of Bran, which is emblazoned on the front of this cauldron of regeneration. And carved into the rock is the Madonna, but this is also the Great Mother. The fusion of pagan and Christian symbolism is very strong in the Grail stories and in the Arthurian legends. I think it's part of the allure, because we find our roots. If we have a European heritage at all, we find our roots in those older traditions, those pre-Christian traditions. And honest to God, because I've been through this, if the Christian part of you disappears, then you become a pagan. I mean, that's what's under there. I learned this because I did some energy work in the 90s, which kind of led to my healing work. In 1990, I started doing energy healing because I had a full Kundalini thing, and I had my clairvoyance was off the charts. And that's when this happened, and all this stuff came through in the 90s. This energy worker was Jewish, and she was very talented, very good at what she did, but she bumped up against, I was very strongly Christian, actually, not outwardly, I didn't talk about it, but inside myself, I had a very strong connection to Christ and the Virgin Mary and Joan of Arc, because we were French-Canadian Catholics, and Joan of Arc was, Joan of Arc was somebody I grew up with. And she said at one point about being allergic to Christianity, and she did something that, yes, she energetically cleared that, which I deeply regret, frankly, because I don't, I always had such a holy feeling with that. And then got upset that, I don't know if she thought underneath, you take Christianity away and a person will be Jewish, but she literally had a conniption fit about a week later and started telling people I was a witch. And I thought, well, if you remove Christianity from a French and Irish European heritage person, that's what you get. What has come down to us as being called a witch, even though I don't see it that way. I really think witchcraft is sort of the shamanism of Europe. It's basically all shamanism, isn't it? There are spirits, and those spirits are there, no matter what you do. Anyway, to get on with the tarot deck. So the Ace of Grails is the Holy Grail in its primal form. There's cauldrons of regeneration all through the Celtic literature, the Irish and Welsh particularly. And so this combines that with the chalice of Christ at the Last Supper, or the chalice that collected Christ's blood as he hung on the cross. But these are the same thing. They're the same thing because the Grail grants all wishes. It's kind of a cornucopia or a corn of plenty. It gives you the fulfillment of your wishes. And so that all comes together because, for instance, in the Grail Castle, Corvinec, these people who are the keepers of the Grail are fed and nourished by the Grail. The Maiden of Grails comes in carrying the Grail, and now in the ballad of Thomas the Rhymer, he talks about how in Faery there are waters of tears, the salt water of tears that flow through Faery, and the rivers of blood that flow through Faery. And there's nothing sinister about that, because if you simply realize that Faery on some level is the land of the ancestors, therefore the land of the departed, that means that whatever manner of death we had, and there's been a lot of war, there's been a lot of violence on earth, so some people have had a bloody death, but the blood of the dead and dying goes down into the earth, into the underworld. And the tears, of course, are all the mourning and grieving over death and the loss of loved ones. So this is what runs through Faery. And this is what this figure on this card is carrying in the Holy Grail, the water of tears and the blood of, actually the blood that, the life is in the blood, right? So the blood that is spilled in death, but also the blood of birth. I mean, we as women, we know blood. And also there's an aspect of it that has to do, again, with the bloodlines. Also, this has to do with fertility. The water, of course, the cup suit and the Grail suit has a lot to do with fertility and love and romance and all those kinds of things, and plenty, and just, you know, all the life-affirming qualities of water. So the Maiden of Grails carries the Grail into King Arthur's Hall during the Pentecost, which is when the tongues of flame fall on everyone and they can speak in tongues, and they've basically been granted great mysteries. And it's when the Grail is set on the banqueting table, flames of the Pentecost descend on the knights and King Arthur, and they can speak in tongues. And they have, so again, we have the old pre-Christian mystery with the Christian mystery combined. You know, having been raised very strong Catholic and pre-Vatican II, in a very medieval French-Canadian form of Catholicism, which was Catholicism as it was before the French Revolution. So very medieval. I think that's my attraction to the Gothic things and to these Arthurian things, because it's kind of all in there, you know, because being the first Christian church to spread over the earth, the Catholic Church absorbed the folk traditions of the peoples that it was converting. It was absorbed everything. It didn't necessarily judge it. A lot of the judgment came when Protestantism became a force and there was a clash. And in that clash, of course, we had the witch hunts and all that stuff. It was kind of a war against these old traditional cultures in Europe. So the knight is Sir Galahad, and Sir Galahad is, again, I will tell you this about this Grail family. It's not a family in the sense of a mother, father, child. They're held together by the Grail. So it's more of a symbolic family, a Grail family. So Sir Galahad is the son of Elaine, Lily Maid Elaine of Corbinac, and Sir Lancelot. And this is what, in some accounts, engineered by Merlin, because the son of Lancelot was meant to achieve the Holy Grail, and Lady Elaine was a Grail bloodline princess. So in this card, Sir Lancelot has the horse with the 50 silver bells in its mane. So he is an emissary of Faery. He has, you know, the salmon colors on his armor. So he brings in the oceanic and the waters and all of that stuff with him. And he's very young. All these are very young, you know, and pure. He's young and he's pure. And he is using the fairy vehicle energy to achieve the Holy Grail. And he's got a heart with wings. Now that's something from the Sufi order. I could go into so many things. That's an emblem of the Sufi order, but it's also an emblem of any kind of spiritual warrior. It comes from the heart. You know, the French word courage comes from the French word for heart, cœur, and so heart and courage and wings of the spirit is what assists Galahad to achieve the Grail. In order to be the Grail Knight, you know, you have to be able to travel between the worlds, which is what he does. You have to be able to do that pretty effortlessly. Lancelot couldn't do it because he was too worldly. He was having an affair with Guinevere. That was an obstacle for him to achieve the Grail. But this person is otherworldly. Even if he's human, he's otherworldly. So, and now the Queen of Grails is Dindrain, and she is a sister of Percival. And her story is very interesting. It's brief, actually, in Les Morts d'Arthur, but it's interesting. She's a virgin, she's a maiden, which we can say is a young child or, you know, young girl. Percival is the fool, of course. I guess he's pure in the fact that he's childlike, virginal in the sense of being, I guess, naive. He's just in the experience. He sets out on the quest and he's in the experience. He's not sophisticated, he's not wise. He's kind of a simple soul. Dindrain is with the Grail questing knights, which is Lancelot and Bors and Galahad and Percival, and they arrive at a castle. And when the knights of the castle see they have this girl with them, you cannot pass by unless you honor the tradition of this castle. And the tradition of the castle was that this girl has to donate blood to the queen of the castle because she's got, in some texts, leprosy, or she's just barely alive, and she has to constantly bathe in the blood of virgins. Now, where have we heard this before? Yeah, this stuff goes way back. I'm not saying she's as bad as Countess Bathory, I wouldn't know, but Dindrain agrees to donate her pure virginal blood to heal the queen. And in the process, she gives so much of her blood that she dies. But she's not really dead. She's set on a boat. So in the card, she's holding the Holy Grail because all the Grail Keepers are holding the Grail. And she's got a bit of a salmon pink because salmon is wisdom. Because salmon always goes against the stream to go back to its origin point. So in a spiritual path, you can say that, you can all go downstream, you're moving away from God, but when you push against the stream to go back to God, that's why the salmon is sacred. And she's lying in this boat, which is designed to look like those Virgin Mary medals I used to get when I was a kid all the time. So she's in the medal, because some people have described her as a female Christ. So the head of the bed is made from branches from the Garden of Eden, tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And there hangs a tapestry of the bleeding heart of Christ, and the hands of God making a Vesica Pisces, which is basically a symbol of the birth canal, right? Dindrain's not dead. She's in a state of suspended animation, and this propels this boat. So she's also holding a parchment, and the parchment has a message about how to finally achieve the Grail quest. And because the cup suit and the waters have to do with the twilight and the sunset, that time of day, you have this sort of sense of a setting sun streaming across the waters. Now, the King of Grails is the Fisher King. The story of the Fisher King is that he's the wounded king and the maimed king. He's got the thigh wound, which is really a genital. I guess he's sort of castrated or something. Anyway, he's wounded in the genitals, so he can't represent the fertility of the kingdom. He can't procreate. And the Grails are all about fertility. There's a large aspect of it. So he's in the castle of Corbinac, and he's the last of the line for obvious reasons. And he's charged with keeping the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail keeps him alive. So again, there's a sense of suspended animation here. And actually, Galahad, when it comes to the achievement of the Grail vision, he enters a kind of a state of suspended animation. In other words, he enters a state of life in death, I guess you could call it, being alive in the other dimensions. So I'm not sure about what that's got to do with a lot of this, except that we know now more about the use of blood in these kind of bloodline families, especially virgin's blood, and we know what and the power of keeping them going long after they should, I guess. So he's being kept alive by the Grail, and it is also a cause of the wasteland, because the king is supposed to be fertile. The king represents the plenty and the bounty of the land. The queen and the king together create the fertility and bounty in the land. So when the king is maimed in this way, and he doesn't have a queen, and he's the last of the line, the land is wasted. But there is a way to heal him, but he has to be asked the question, who does the Grail serve? By the Anointed One. Not anyone can ask him that. Only those who are meant to ask the question will find him and ask the question. In some accounts, this king was wounded by the sacred spear, which is why he can't heal. In some analysis, he's equated with King Arthur, who was also in the end of his reign childless. His wife is off with his best friend Lancelot, and I don't think they have kids either. So there's a childlessness at Camelot, there's a childlessness at Corvinet. So that's why he's often equated with the Fisher King as well. So in the early stories, Percival asks the question and heals the king, and then it changes to Galahad. So that's the court of the Grail Keepers. And there again, there's the bloodline issue. These are people of a sacred bloodline, which sounds a lot like the Merovingian bloodline, and that they're descendants of Christ, and this is why they have this power and why they hold the Grail. So all this stuff weaves in the kind of holy blood, holy Grail idea that Mary Magdalene was pregnant with a child of Jesus, and that she came to the south of France, and there is actually a shrine to her in the south of France. Her legend is that she lived in a cave, and her hair grew and covered her whole body, and so her hair is kept in a kind of a glass casket or a crystal casket in the cave, and it's a holy relic there of Mary Magdalene. So this connection is very old, this idea that she made this journey, and that this child seeded the royal families of France and Europe, the source of the idea of the divine right of kings. So there's just a lot of stuff. You know, this stuff is like an onion. You know, you can peel one layer and you go for another layer and another layer and another. This is very old stuff, and it's full of all kinds of cool, interesting little highways and byways. You know, that's why they put a maze in some of these big cathedrals, because everything has this maze-like quality in the medieval world. You know, so that's as far as I'll go with this today. And then I want to show you, I've been looking down a bit because I have the book. This is the color guidebook from lulu.com. And I think they did a really nice job. You can see the color images of the cards. The print's bigger than I thought, but you know, I didn't realize it was going to be that big. And, but anyway, you can see the color, and there's also one in black and white that's about half the price of the color one on lulu.com. So if you only want to, you know, it depends on what you want. If you want to just have a nice book, or you want to, you know, just use it to learn the cards. So, you know, I try to make as many options as possible. There's also a Kindle version on Amazon and another paperback on Amazon too. So, if you enjoyed this, drop me a like, please. And please comment. I really like to read your comments. And subscribe. We can grow the channel. I mean, there's an endless amount of stuff having to do with this subject. I also have links for if you want to purchase the deck or the books in the description. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.